For centuries, the story we've all heard about where Western thought comes from, well, it's been pretty clear-cut.
Hmm.
Philosophy, science, even democracy, they just uh, kind of sprang into existence,
Yeah.
fully formed.
Out of ancient Greece.
Exactly. Specifically from Ionia, that coast over in modern Turkey
Hmm.
around the 6th century BCE. It's always presented like this Greek miracle.
Yeah, like it just appeared out of thin air, a complete break from, the older myths and traditions.
It's a really powerful story, that idea of unique genius just popping up.
It is, it's very compelling, but what if it's not the whole story?
Okay.
What if this amazing intellectual flowering wasn't quite so isolated? What if it was actually deeply shaped by long, steady contact with those really rich ancient cultures nearby, Mesopotamia and Egypt?
Ah, so challenging the miracle idea.
Directly. This deep dive, we're going to dig into that. We'll explore what some scholars call the Orientalizing thesis. The idea here is that philosophy emerging in Ionia, well, it wasn't spontaneous generation, but it also wasn't just like passively receiving homework from the East.
So something in between.
Something much more dynamic, a revolutionary act of synthesis and transformation. We'll argue that the Ionian Greeks, sitting at this incredible crossroads of cultures,
Yeah.
took all this data, these technologies, even myths from the Near East,
Right.
and they subjected it all to a totally new way of thinking, critical, rational inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't just copy, they remade it. And that became the foundation for Western thought.
Okay, let's unpack that then. If it wasn't a miracle, if it was this transformation,
Yeah.
why Ionia? Why Miletus specifically? What made that place the perfect crucible of inquiry, as you put it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you said it wasn't exactly a quiet library corner for deep thoughts.
Oh, definitely not. It
Yeah.
really comes down to location. Ionia is this, coastal strip on the western edge of Anatolia, modern Turkey, with islands like Samos, Chios right
A
offshore.
natural bridge.
A perfect natural nexus between the Asian world and the Near East. And starting around the 8th century BCE, these Ionian cities, especially Miletus, they really stepped up. They kind of filled the gap left by the Phoenicians and became huge commercial powers.
And the scale was just immense, wasn't it?
Mhm.
I think Miletus founded something like dozens of colonies.
Dozens is putting it mildly. Miletus alone is credited with founding maybe 80 to 90 colonies. Think about that network.
Wow.
It stretched from Egypt, the Black Sea, all the way over to Italy, France, Spain. They were shipping out pottery, textiles, metal stuff, wine, olive oil,
And bringing back.
everything. Iron, tin, lead, fancy stuff like ivory from Egypt, even amber from the Baltic Sea.
So this huge trade network they built,
Hmm.
what was the real effect? I mean, obviously they got rich, but did it change them in deeper ways?
Oh, profoundly. Two huge effects. First, yes, wealth. Unprecedented wealth, especially for this new merchant class. Miletus was practically a byword for rich. And that money buys leisure time, resources. You need that for intellectual pursuits. But second, and this is maybe even more crucial, the sea wasn't just carrying goods.
Just carrying ideas.
Exactly. Ideas, technologies, cultural habits, myths, everything. These Ionian cities became genuine cosmopolitan melting pots.
So Greeks living right alongside Phoenicians, Lydians, Egyptians.
Yeah, and when you're constantly bumping up against different ways of living, different beliefs, different gods, it forces you to look at your own stuff differently. It breaks down that cultural bubble. It demands critical self-examination.
Okay, so a real melting pot of ideas. But you also mentioned a socio-political cauldron. What else is going on besides trade?
Well, politically, the key thing was the polis, the independent city-state. This setup fostered incredible citizen involvement, lots of public discussion, debate. Power wasn't just held by some king far away.
So you had to be able to argue your case. Persuasion mattered.
Vitally, it became a crucial tool for just getting things done in the city. Clear thinking had real stakes. And all this internal debate was happening while Ionia itself was kind of stuck in the middle, what you might call productive instability.
Caught between empires, like a small boat in a big storm.
That's a great way to put it. They were constantly dealing with powerful neighbors. First, the Lydian kingdom under King Croesus repeated attacks, subjugation. Archaeologists find destruction layers from that time.
Wow.
And then, just as they adjust to the Lydians, boom, along comes the massive Persian Empire and conquers them.
So now they're paying tribute, getting conscripted.
Dealing with Persian-backed tyrants, constant pressure, constant adaptation.
But this pressure didn't exactly make the Greek cities band together in perfect harmony, did it?
Yeah.
I think you called the Ionian League less an alliance, more a fight club.
Huh. Yeah, that's kind of it. The rivalry between the cities, that this agonism was intense. They competed fiercely, not just in war, but in wealth, influence, and key for us, cultural prestige.
Like building the biggest temple.
Exactly. Look at the huge temples in Samos, Smyrna, Ephesus. They were trying to outdo each other. And here's a really, really crucial piece. Unlike Egypt or Babylon, Greece didn't have a super powerful, centralized priesthood enforcing religious dogma.
Intellectual freedom.
Huge freedom. It meant you could start questioning the old myths, like saying earthquakes weren't Poseidon being angry, but maybe, natural causes without getting hauled off for heresy.
Okay, so bringing it all together. This mix of political chaos, trade wealth, freedom from dogma, intense competition. It sounds like the perfect storm, the perfect fertile ground.
Absolutely, that productive instability. It created the conditions where those seeds of knowledge coming from the Near East could actually take root and, more importantly, transform into something completely new. It wasn't just about getting the info, it was about having a unique environment to think about it differently.
Right, free from those rigid structures elsewhere.
Precise.
So with this unique environment in Ionia, how did this new thinking actually, start? Who were the first key people, and what was so radical about what they did?
Well, right there in Miletus, you get three figures pretty close together. Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. And they make this really conscious, deliberate shift. They move away from the old stories, the myths, where gods are pulling all the strings.
Right.
And they start trying to give rational, natural explanation for how the world works. They weren't looking for a new god. They were looking for a whole new kind of answer.
And the core of their project was this search for the arche, which means something like beginning or ruling principle.
Exactly that. They were hunting for a single fundamental stuff or principle that everything comes from and eventually everything goes back to.
That's a huge leap, isn't it?
Oh, massive. It fundamentally changes the question. Instead of asking, who made the world? Like in the old creation myths.
The theogonies?
Right, the family trees of the gods. They started asking, what is the world made of? That's shifting from theogony to cosmogony, the origin of the physical world from some primary material.
And underlying that is the assumption that the world makes sense, that it's orderly and we can figure it out.
Precisely. That there's a rational, intelligible order, and crucially, that the human mind can access it. No special revelation needed.
And along with this came that move to natural explanations, getting the gods out of the picture for things like earthquakes and thunder.
Systematically. It wasn't just a one-off. For example, Thales suggested the Earth floats on water, so earthquakes happen when waves rocket. It's wrong, of course, but it's a natural explanation, no Poseidon involved.
Okay.
Then Anaximander said earthquakes were from the Earth drying and tracking. And Anaximenes thought it was alternating wet and dry periods, making the ground split. Same for weather. Anaximenes explained thunder as clouds crashing together and lightning as fire flashing out from the collision.
So replacing divine anger with physical processes, that feels like, well, the very start of science, doesn't it?
It really is. That moment they dared to ask how instead of who, it just reoriented everything.
Yeah.
And you see this incredible intellectual energy and how quickly they critiqued and built on each other's ideas.
Right. Starting with Thales, Aristotle called him the first philosopher. He picked water as the arche.
Yes, and it wasn't just a random guess. It was based on observation. Water's essential for life. It exists as solid, liquid, gas, plus living in Miletus, a huge port city.
Water is everywhere.
It's primary. So picking water was that first crucial step away from myth towards natural philosophy.
Okay, so Thales picks water, but then his student, Anaximander, comes along and basically says, hang on, professor, what was his issue?
Anaximander applied logic, pure reason. He argued, look, if the arche was one specific thing like water, wouldn't it eventually overwhelm its opposite? If everything came from infinite water, how could fire even exist? It would have been extinguished long ago.
The problem of opposites.
Exactly. So he said the arche couldn't be any one specific element. It had to be something more fundamental, something undefined. He called it the apuron.
The unlimited or indefinite?
Right. An eternal, unobservable, inexhaustible sort of reservoir from which the warring opposites, hot, cold, wet, dry, separate out. This is a huge conceptual jump, proposing something purely abstract, something you can't point to solve a logical problem.
Okay, so Thales.
Yeah.
Tangible water, Anaximander.
Yeah.
Abstract apuron. And then his student, Anaximenes, seems to go back to something tangible again, air. Was that like a step backward?
It might look like it, but actually no, it was a brilliant synthesis. He proposed air as the archer, yes, but his real innovation was proposing a clear, universal physical mechanism for how this one substance turns into everything else.
Oh.
Rarefaction and condensation. Thinning and thickening. He said when air thins out, it gets hot, becomes fire. When it thickens, condenses, it gets cold, becomes wind, then clouds, then water, then earth, then even stones.
And he had that simple observation about breathing, right?
Yeah. Yes. Brilliant, everyday observation. Breathe with your mouth relaxed, the air is warm, rarefied. Purse your lips and blow, the air is cool, condensed.
Wow.
So he's bringing in a quantitative idea density to explain qualitative differences. Hot, cold, solid, liquid. What's so amazing here is you see this clear dialectic. Thesis, Thales is water. Antithesis, Anaximander's critique and apeiron. Synthesis, Anaximenes' air with a mechanism.
You weren't just throwing ideas out there.
Not at all. They were in a rational debate, building on, criticizing, refining each other's work. The real revolution wasn't any single answer, maybe, but the invention of this method.
The method of logical critique and proposing better alternatives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That became the engine for basically all of Western philosophy and science that followed.
Okay, so if the Ionians were transforming this Near Eastern knowledge, it couldn't have just floated over on the breeze. How did the information actually get there? What were the concrete pathways?
Right. It wasn't magic. It was flowing through some pretty major pipelines. First off, that commercial superhighway we talked about.
The trade routes.
Yeah. Ionian cities like Miletus, Phocaea, they were the absolute masters of sea trade in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. This wasn't just occasional contact. It was deep, continuous economic integration across the Mediterranean.
And they set up shop in other places too, right?
Yeah.
Trading posts.
Yes, emporia. Permanent or semi-permanent bases in foreign lands. We know they had a major one in Egypt called Naucratis. That ensures really prolonged, close cultural contact.
And maybe even whole communities living abroad, not just traders passing through.
There's evidence for that, too. We have Assyrian records from the 8th century BCE mentioning a town on the Syrian coast called Ionia.
Which sounds like Ionia.
Exactly. It strongly suggests there were established settlements where Greeks and Near Eastern folks were living and working together side by side. That allows for a much deeper exchange of complex ideas, not just goods.
And maybe the most obvious concrete proof of knowledge transfer is the alphabet itself.
Absolutely fundamental. The Greeks adopting the Phoenician alphabet probably around the 8th century BCE was the prerequisite for their own literature and philosophy.
You can't write philosophy without writing.
Right, and learning and adapting a whole phonetic writing system that requires really intimate contact. It shows the channel was wide open for sophisticated stuff to pass through. The very tool the Milesians used to write down their ideas was an import.
Okay, so trade, settlements, the alphabet. What else?
Well, think about artisans, skilled craftspeople.
Like stonemasons or metalworkers.
Especially those working with valuable imported materials like ivory carvers. Scholars think these artisans traveled a lot between the big centers in the Near East and the rising Greek cities.
Acting as kind of cultural go-betweens.
Exactly. Cultural brokers. They wouldn't just transmit artistic styles, but also the stories, the myths, the religious symbols associated with those styles. They're carrying a whole package of ideas.
That makes sense. And what about the bigger picture, the empires? Did their interactions play a role?
Oh, definitely. Politics solidified these connections. That long period when Lydia dominated Ionia, it led to tons of cultural mixing. Ionians adopting Lydian fashions, elite families intermarrying.
So conquest wasn't just conquest, it was also cultural exchange.
A powerful current. And then, when the Persians conquered both Lydia and Ionia in the mid-6th century, well, that plugged Ionia into this enormous multicultural empire.
Right.
We even know Ionian craftsmen and engineers were drafted to work on the massive Persian building projects like at Susa and Persepolis. So you have direct, continuous influence flowing back from the heartlands.
So it really wasn't just a trickle of information.
No way. It was flowing through major pipelines, trade, settlements, technology transfer like the alphabet, traveling artisans, imperial integration. Ionia was deeply woven into the Near Eastern world. The knowledge was there. The environment was ripe for doing something new with it.
Okay, so let's get into those specifics then. The apples-to-apples comparison. How exactly did Ionian thinking take Near Eastern ideas and transform them? Let's start with cosmology, the origin of the universe.
Right. Well, the parallels on the starting point are really striking. Both Egyptian and Babylonian creation stories begin with basically watery chaos. In Egypt, you have this primordial ocean, none, and the universe emerges from it, usually through a creator god like Adam or Ptah. In Babylon, you have the famous Enuma Elish epic. It starts with formless water beings, Apsu and Tiamat, and creation happens after a huge cosmic battle where the god Marduk kills Tiamat and makes the world from her body.
And the point of these stories was often religious or political.
Yeah, often to glorify a specific god, like Marduk, or to legitimize the king's rule, connect him to the cosmic order. So when Thales comes along and says the Archa, the origin of everything, is water.
He's clearly tapping into that very old tradition.
Absolutely. The raw material is there. But here's the crucial difference, and it's huge.
Yeah.
The Egyptian Nun, the Babylonian Tiamat, they are divine persons. They have wills, emotions, they act. Creation is a divine drama.
Right. God's doing things.
But Thales is water, or Anaximander's Aperon, or Anaximenes' air. These are impersonal substances, natural forces. Change happens because of the inherent nature of the substance itself, not because a god decides something.
That's the depersonalization you mentioned.
Exactly. The Milesians took the basic stuff of Near Eastern myth, the watery beginning, but they stripped out the divine actors. They turned a story about who made the world into a theory about what the world is made of and how it works. They swapped theogony for physics, divine will for natural process.
That is a massive shift in thinking. What about astronomy? The debt to Babylon seems pretty well known there.
It is, and rightly so. Babylonian astronomy was incredibly sophisticated empirically. They kept these meticulous records for centuries, the astronomical diaries.
Just observation after observation.
Tons of data. But their main goal wasn't really understanding the cosmos for its own sake.
Huh?
It was practical prediction, mainly for divination, tracking stars and planets to read omens for the king.
Right.
They got incredibly good at it. They figured out the Saros cycle, that 18-year pattern, which let them predict lunar and even solar eclipses with amazing accuracy, highly mathematical, very skilled, but no evidence they tried to build physical models to explain why things moved the way they did.
And Thales famously predicted that solar eclipse in 585 BCE, probably using that Babylonian cycle knowledge.
Almost certainly. And that act itself was philosophically explosive. It showed that even these terrifying, seemingly random celestial events followed predictable patterns. It revealed an underlying order, an intelligible system, the birth of the idea of the cosmos.
But the real Ionian revolution came after that.
Yes, with Anaximander. He took the Babylonian data, the when, and asked the revolutionary question, why? He developed the first known speculative model of the cosmos.
The cylinder Earth.
Right. Not a flat disk on water, but a cylinder hanging freely in space. And the sun, moon, stars weren't just lights in the sky. They were holes in giant hollow wheels filled with fire orbiting the Earth.
Wildly wrong, but
it's the first attempt ever at a mechanical geometric explanation. He's trying to imagine a three-dimensional universe working according to principles, not divine whims.
So they took the predictive data and turned it towards building rational, physical models. Shifted the whole goal.
Exactly. From prediction to explanation, they transformed astronomical data into cosmological theory.
Okay, and mathematics. The Near East had some serious math skills too, right?
Oh, yeah. A really powerful toolkit. Egyptian math was very practical, surveying fields after the Nile flood, calculating volumes for building projects, engineering stuff. We see it in texts like the Rhine Papyrus, lots of how-to recipes, algorithms for specific problems.
Get the job done math.
Pretty much. Babylonian math was even more advanced. They used that base 60 system, had huge tables of pre-calculated values, could solve complex equations, linear, quadratic, even some cubic ones. They definitely knew the relationship we call the Pythagorean theorem long before Pythagoras.
That's still practical.
Still fundamentally algorithmic and utilitarian, focused on getting the right answer for a specific problem. There's just no evidence they had the concept of a formal proof, of demonstrating why procedure worked universally.
And the Ionian change started again with Thales, bringing geometry from Egypt.
That's the tradition, using it for practical things initially, like measuring pyramid heights or how far away ships were.
But then came the crucial shift.
Yes, the crucial innovation was asking a new kind of question. An Egyptian scribe knew how to find the area of this particular field. A Babylonian knew the steps to solve this type of equation. The Greeks started asking, wait, why does this method work? What's the general principle behind it that makes it true not just here, but everywhere, always?
The search for the universal principle. The beginning of proof.
Exactly, the beginning of deductive reasoning in mathematics. They started abstracting universal theorems from specific procedures or algorithms. Thales is credited with starting this, seeking demonstrations for general geometric truths. It's the move from math as a practical art, a techne, to math as a theoretical science, an episteme.
So the Near East provided the powerful tools.
And the Ionians asked for the theoretical blueprint. Why do the tools work? That laid the foundation for the whole axiomatic deductive approach that defines Western mathematics. So when we look back, the birth of philosophy in Ionia, it was absolutely a watershed moment, a game changer. But as we've seen, calling it just a Greek miracle really misses the complexity.
Yeah, it feels too simple now.
The parallels with Near Eastern thought are too strong, the channels for transmission too clear to see it as popping up out of nowhere. It wasn't purely an invention ex nihilo.
But at the same time, it clearly wasn't just copying things down either. We saw that transformation happen again and again.
Absolutely not just copying, a fundamental revolutionary transformation. They took those mythic stories and stripped them down, depersonalized them into physics.
Right.
They took the empirical star charts and used them to build speculative geometric models of the whole cosmos. They took the powerful math recipes and demanded to know the universal principles, the proofs underneath. In every area, the goal shifted away from just being useful or predicting omens or backing up the king.
Towards understanding for its own sake. Rational understanding.
That's the core of it. The Ionian achievement was this incredible act of transformative synthesis. You could almost call it intellectual alchemy.
Taking the base metals of Near Eastern knowledge.
Exactly. The centuries of accumulated knowledge from Egypt and Mesopotamia were the essential raw materials. That inheritance wasn't trivial, it was the foundation.
And the catalyst, the thing that sparked the transformation, was that unique Ionian environment.
That whole mix we talked about, the cosmopolitan cities, the trade wealth, the political fragmentation and competition, the relative freedom from religious dogma.
That productive instability.
Perfect term for it. That's what allowed them, or maybe even forced them, to apply this new critical spirit to everything they encountered, to abstract, to systematize, to look for underlying natural causes.
And the result was this entirely new vision of the universe.
A cosmos. An ordered, intelligible whole, governed by impersonal, universal laws that the human mind could grasp. The real miracle wasn't creation from nothing. It was the miracle of transformation through critical reason, filtering all that received wisdom through this new lens.
So for you listening, maybe the next time you hear about some miracle breakthrough, whether it's in technology or science or even just an idea, think about the Ionians. They show us that real leaps forward often aren't just about inventing something completely new from scratch. So much of it is about that profound critical transformation of what's already there.
Seeing the connections, the influences, the raw materials.
And then having the courage, the critical spirit to ask those relentless why questions and weave it all into something genuinely new. What existing knowledge, what ideas that you already have could you transform today?